Hello, Hare Krishna. My name is Jvalamukhi Dasi, and I am recording video number 5 in the J Files, my video blog of the book that I've written, which is my journal called My Hoo-Hoo and the Destiny of the Universe, the Great Sinister Movement, the Golden Age, and the Firewalk of a Hare Krishna Kid. This 5th entry deals with my growing up in a small town in Ohio and lays I'm trying to paint a picture of my early childhood so that people understand the complexity and the multi-faceted aspects of sorting out the poison from the nectar, the healing and acceptance of cognitive dissonance about the truths of transcendence and satanic ritual right side by side. I don't want you to think that I grew up just, with crazy, horrible stuff and somehow here I am. No, it was a very full life and a lot of beautiful things too. And so I'm laying a foundation here for you to understand that and also to understand how common and normal this is worldwide. And if you are a person wanting sincerely God and have a lot of issues that may be in your background too. So here it is. My mother also became a hippie in the 1960s. Her long black hair hung down on either side of her beautiful face. She was shy growing up and tried to hide behind her hair, except the only effect, she told me, was that her well-shaped large nose stuck out. She was the daughter of a Methodist minister and grew up at church. She loved Jesus and loved singing with her mother, who played the organ. At an early age, her mother got polio, but that never slowed Grandma down. Grandma was a veritable force of positivity. Even though her minister husband put her in the mental hospital where they administered her with electric shocks so that he could get remarried, still, she continued smiling. One of her cheery quotes to my mother, "You just had to get divorced. I had to lose my mind to get away from my marriage." She wrote letters to the President of the USA, offering helpful suggestions on how to run the country. She had guts, Grandma. The piano playing and loudly sung hymns were a constant every time that we visited her. There was never real food in the fridge there, but you could always count on the chocolate ice cream in the dinner. I don't remember my grandmother. Excuse me here. Sorry, I misread that. I don't remember my grandfather, the Methodist minister. I remember seeing pictures of him. He died when we were very young, and I'm glad of it because the only real story that sticks in my mind about the man was how he drowned a litter of kittens who had distemper in front of my 4-year-old mother, blaming the kids that if they hadn't touched the kittens so young, they wouldn't have gotten sick in the first place, and he wouldn't have had to do this. Grandma Edna walked back and forth, dismayed, wringing her hands and fretting, unable to do anything about it. After the kittens were drowned, he buried them. My mother stayed behind, putting her ear to the ground, and heard one faintly mewing. Excitedly, she exclaimed, "She's still alive! She's still alive!" Not only did her father not share her joy, he dug up the kitten and finished the job. That was my mother's upbringing, a real man of the cloth. Yeah, she told me that story, and I'm like, you know what, Mom? There's a lot that kind of adds up here now that I have a lot more pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that was the past. You don't do that kind of thing without some serious cause. My grandfathers, both of them, were very sick men. It is my duty as their descendant that the buck stops with me, stops with my family, stops with all my ways of being, and that I will not let the sickness of the Kali Yuga influences pass. My mother's new stepmother was straight out of a storybook, classic stepmother. My mother and her 2 stepsisters spent time in foster homes while their father was getting settled with his new family. In the foster homes, she had a taste of what other, quote, normal kids' lives looked like. But like Grandma My mother always chose to see the positive, and till this day remains a cheerleader for everyone in her life. My mother became vegetarian in her late teens, when while eating a piece of chicken, she got a vein stuck in her teeth. Ew, yuck. She pulled it out, looking at it. Slowly, it dawned on her just what she'd been doing all these years. Chicken, vein, leg. My leg has veins. Oh my God. Ew. How could I have been so blind? Animals are people just as much as I am. I can't eat my friends. The only problem was she didn't know how to cook. She lived on salad and sunflower seeds until she had her first taste of Krishna prasadam. She remembers. I sat there on my knees, eating with both hands from the piece of wax paper that was used as a paper plate. I just leaned over, shoveling the delicious food into my mouth. I thought, surely they wouldn't have anything this good tomorrow. I better eat it all today. But they did. She tasted the rose water offered to the Lord and experienced bliss in its spiritually imbued nectarian taste. Going in front of the altar, she bowed down to the deity. The deity form of Lord Krishna in that temple was named Shri Radha Murlidhar. God is everywhere, but mercifully appears in a form to reciprocate our worship. To explain deity worship, the example is given of a post box. There are boxes everywhere, but only the authorized post box will get your letters delivered. Thus, the Lord's form is made according to scriptural injunctions, not according to the imagination of some artist. It is not an idol. Because we are conditioned to see his form as material, he appears in this Archa-vigraha, a worshipful form just to uplift and purify our now mundane senses. We would not have senses if the Lord did not have senses. We would not have desire for personal relationships if it did not originate in him. All that is needed to purify our present state so that we can again interact with God, Sri Krishna, and is our original consciousness. A stick. Oh my God, I'm getting too tired. Sorry about that, everybody. Thanks for hanging with me with this reading here. I'm sorry I'm stumbling over it. Let's try it again. A sick man may be dysfunctional and in pain, but the solution is not to kill the body or make it zero. It is to cure the body. The deity's names are Shri Radha Murlidhar, the original goddess of fortune, who perfectly worships the transcendental flute player, Lord Krishna. As she bowed her head, a powerful golden light began to fill my mother's body. It was so overwhelming that she sat straight up and said out loud to their lordships, "Oh, no, 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 please don't show yourself to me. I can't bear it." She regrets it now, but said at the time she felt like she was literally going to explode, so strong was the Lord's presence. She said, "You are the same God I met in the church, the same one I've known my whole life. Now you are standing in front of me." Her sense of wonder grew each day as she heard about Krishna and understood the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam from the lotus lips of Srila Prabhupada, who gave her her initiated name. This name refers to the lover of Krishna, the lovely transcendental milk maidens of the spiritual land of Vrindavan. The name means always looking for Krishna with eyes like the deer. That's my mom. Her main shelter is her music. She plays guitar, a variety of stringed instruments, and mostly the piano. Music is in her heart. She is an empowered songwriter and singer. Songs were never entertainment, but survival, life itself. Even if there was nothing else functional, there she would be, banging away on the piano and singing her heart out to God. It was comforting to all of us. Her inspiration came from hearing the descriptions in Krishna book of the gopis composing and singing songs about Krishna's childhood pastimes. She would do the same and engage all who cared to hear. In fact, she and my father are both very creative people and used to put on puppet shows for the kids during the Sunday feast program in Los Angeles at the Hare Krishna temple. The puppet shows became so popular that there were more adults there than in the lecture in the temple room. During some of the darkest days of our family life, poverty, depression, my father's rages, when we had to move away from the Krishna community and back to Ohio, to my father's parents' place for support, my mother had us recording the now famous Little Vaishnava songs. It was our lifeline, our connection to Srila Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya's mission to spread love of Godhead. Almost every Hare Krishna kid of my age knows my mom's songs by heart, at least a few of them. She sold 40 cassette tapes back in the 80s, which were bootlegged and distributed all over the world. Let everyone hear. She never minded. It was always about service anyway, and still is. I remember a unique experience at the age of 18. I was sitting in the Govinda's Hare Krishna restaurant in Sweden, the place I had gone to escape Ohio. At a table with two friends, I was sitting. One was from Hungary and the other one was from Sweden. We all shared the same name of Jahnavi, which is a name for the goddess of the Ganges River. It's quite common. It's like the Jennifer of the Hare Krishna world. Anyway, 3 Jahnavis all sat at this table, and I started telling them about my mom's songs. And I began to sing one. I'm a little Vaishnav, come and play with me. When you come to my house, this is what you'll see. A is for altar, B is for big books, C is for the countertop where Mataji cooks, D is for devotees, E for ears and eyes, F is for the flower where the honeybee flies. I'm a little Vaishnav, come and play with me. When you come to my house, this is what you'll see. I had only gotten a few lines into the song when the other 2 Jahnavis chimed in and sang the rest of it with me with much mirth and laughter as we tried to remember all the words to a song that defined a very good part of our childhood. G is for garland, H for clapping hands, I for ISKCON centers in many different lands, J is for jalebis, hot and crisp and sweet, K is for Lord Krishna who has pink lotus feet. I'm a little Vaishnav, come and play with me. When you come to my house, this is what you'll see. L is for the love that we offer up to God. M is for his mercy and Mahaprasad. N is for nectar, may I have some please? O is for offering obeisances. I am a little Vaishnav, come and play with me. When you come to my house, this is what you'll see. P is for Prabhupada, pointing the way, taking us back home to Godhead to stay. Q is for quilt, quiet and quote. R is for reading what Prabhupada wrote. I'm a little Vaishnav, come and play with me. When you come to my house, this is what you'll see. S is for singing on Sankirtan. T is for tilak, and you put it on. U for understanding by using your mind. Wait a minute, I think I messed up the alphabet. V is for Vaishnava, very, very kind. I'm a little Vaishnav, come and play with me. When you come to my house, this is what you'll see. W is when you're working for God. X is for extra prashad. Y is for yawning, for yes and for you. Z is for zero, there's no more to do. It's time to stop our play now, but don't be sad, you see. When we go back to Krishna, we'll play eternally. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yay! Sorry, I'm a little tired. By the end of our singing, other people in the restaurant were looking at us, but we were just happy singing together. The funny thing was, when I told them that the child voices on the tapes were myself and my siblings, they said, "Nah, really? You're kidding." It was like I was a celebrity or something. I guess my mom is a folk star of the Hare Krishna world. At the latest gathering of the alumni for the Krishna schools called the Gurukul Reunion, at least 200 voices strong sang that song as we pressed together for the group photo. And I was the one who forgot the words. They knew it better than I did. Yeah, my mother and her music. She has more songs than places to put them. She has enough songs to fill a library. A song for brushing teeth, a song for when you're down, a song for when you're mad, a song for drinking water, a song for surrendering everything to God. And she did. It is from my mother that I imbibed what true devotion to God is. I saw that the pain she was to cause me in this life was not an option for her. It was destiny. It was karmic. There was never any animosity or envy. It was just plain and simple karmic math. In my search for answers, God showed me my relationship to the soul, who is presently my mother in this body. How much pain I caused her in those other lives. She is the only soul I love enough to forgive her anything. Our love is stronger than all of the ways we have hurt each other in the past births. Now we have an opportunity to clear the karmic balance and be spirit souls again, seeing one another as we really are, eternal loving servants of one another, and Shri Radha and Krishna. I've always thought to myself, if our family can make it through this healing, this awful truth of what really happened, then the world will know the greatness of our dearest Srila Prabhupada and what he came to deliver. God's invitation, a chance to step out of the endless cycle of birth and death, a chance to stop hurting each other in every possible way in the name of so-called society, friendship, and love. Real love means to see the true self. The pain I experienced in my relationship with my mother was just the therapeutic method my soul needed to permanently lay down all that keeps me bound here. Good job, Mom. No hard feelings. Yeah, and Dad, if you're reading this, you're invited too. When she moved into the temple in Ohio, my mother gave away all her possessions in an act of renunciation and surrender to God. She even gave away her most prized possession, her guitar, praying to Krishna, if you want me to make music for you, then you will make all arrangements. A short time later, she saw a young devotee lady she knew walking down the street near the temple, holding a guitar. She ran up to her. Where did you get that guitar? She asked. Her friend replied, oh, I was out on book distribution and a man traded me this guitar for some books. My mother said, I just said a prayer to Krishna that if he wanted me to sing for him, to please send me an instrument. Her friend said, oh, well, I guess this is for you then. And she handed my mother the guitar just like that. That guitar still sits in my mother's home, serving the Lord as she continues to compose her songs with it. The following is an homage to Srila Prabhupada and his appearance day written by my mother. It describes in her own words her love and experience with his divine grace. My Memories of Srila Prabhupada by Mrigakshi Devi Dasi. I came to the Krishna Consciousness Movement in 1972. I had only 2 personal contacts with Srila Prabhupada. One was my Brahmana initiation in 1974 in Chicago, and one was a brief moment in a Bhagavatam class in Detroit. By the way, that was the time that I was 1 month old, and she was able to give me a cookie from the lotus hand of His Divine Grace. My big moment with Srila Prabhupada was when I was 1 month old. I made it under the line. I got to meet him. Woohoo! However, all of my contacts with Krishna consciousness were because of Srila Prabhupada, so I guess I will tell you my memories of those contacts. In 1968, I purchased some beads at a head shop to add to the collection I wore around my neck in high school. This necklace had a little card attached to them which read, these beads are made from a plant called Tulsi. Tulsi is very dear to Lord Vishnu. Anyone who remembers Lord Vishnu at the time of death will go back home, back to Godhead. I frantically studied that card over and over, trying to make sense of it. I pictured a man lying on his deathbed, and I realized that someday I would also be there. I desperately wanted to know, who is Lord Vishnu? How could I remember him if I didn't know who he was? I was touched by Srila Prabhupada's mercy. In 1969, I went to New York with my high school class. We were from a small town in Ohio, and the teacher said we were experienced poor. So they took us to the Big Apple to broaden our horizons. We saw the sights, which included ballet and plays, museums and churches, including a hippie church, and after hours, one teacher took a few of us to a topless bar. The next day, we were standing on the sidewalk when a Harinam party came chanting and dancing down the street. The teachers protectively herded us and took us to the other side of the street. They told us, do not look at the devotees. I immediately thought, oh, they must be dangerous. But when the chanting party came by, I looked over and saw this girl's smiling face. With her eyes closed, she was singing for Krishna and unaware that we were avoiding her. I remember thinking, wow, I never saw anyone look so happy. That's how I want to be. I was again touched by Srila Prabhupada's mercy. I had been a vegetarian since I was 16 because someone told me the little animals in the woods wouldn't be afraid of me. I graduated high school in 1970 and then attended Goddard College in Vermont. Mostly I climbed the trees and walked in the forest. It was so beautiful there. I got to live in a co-op vegetarian dorm next to the meditation dorm. Sometimes I would go there and we would stand in a circle and chant Om and feel the love. Often I looked around to see what I was missing because I didn't feel much of anything. There was a music group that practiced in the basement, and I would sit and listen to them play the Javanese gamelan, I don't know how to pronounce that the students had built. It was the first one in the Western world, I was told, very mystical sounding with soft hammers striking metal. One day, they had a performance in the dining hall. It was accompanied by a shadow puppet show depicting the Ramayana. I had no idea what the story was about, but the colors and the flying arrows were intriguing. I was involved with a bread and puppet theater at Goddard and liked this show, and I liked this show very much. We chanted Sita Ram, and Allen Ginsberg also visited us then. He went on to chant Hare Krishna also. I knew this from George Harrison's songs, so I gladly joined in. I was touched by Srila Prabhupada's mercy. Another time, a friend of mine invited me and another friend to sing with him at a mental hospital where he was doing an internship. We had known each other in high school, so we're used to doing our folk songs together. We sang the A word, which meant they were pretty. Oh, we sang for the A word, which meant they were pretty far gone, and some were in straitjackets. So here we were on stage doing our thing. We were chanting. I saw the members of the audience were all pretty distracted and caught up in their own world. Then my one friend, who had been visiting the Boston temple, started chanting Hare Krishna. We chimed in with three-part harmony, and I was amazed at the instant difference. The inmates were rocking back and forth with shining faces and chanting Hare Krishna with us. The ones without jackets had their arms in the air, and I was thinking, what is this Hare Krishna? Soon the doctors made us stop because things were getting too rowdy. The patients once again became disoriented, but for a moment, I think they had become sane. We were all touched by Srila Prabhupada's mercy. In the summer of 1971, I was back in New York with the Bread and Puppet Theater. We were building a funhouse in Coney Island with the Garden of Eden theme. We put on Punch and Judy shows. I played the toy piano and worked with the Gypsy Kids who wrote and performed their own play, Mr. Goodman and Mr. Badman. One day, they couldn't come because one of their cousins had accidentally shot and killed one of their other cousins. They told me this nonchalantly, and I was shocked at what they were dealing with in their young lives. Coney Island was a learning experience for me. I saw legless men sleeping against stinking walls. Old women with rosy cheeks and wild eyes picked up scraps of paper off the street, trying to make sense of their world. I saw policemen on horseback visiting the whorehouse upstairs, and carnies having knife fights after competing all day for business on their Ferris wheels. The cotton candy shop across the street played Hit the Road Jack all day and all night long. And we were offering the Garden of Eden with the pearly gate exit out into the grimy street below the subway bridge. Suckers. One time, the troupe from Vermont came and performed a play called The Butterfly Catcher, starring Yama, the god of death. It was about karma, and Maya had a big part in it. My life was getting pretty horrendous, and I was miserable and confused. One day, we heard singing and cymbals from the street. We went outside to see a Harinam party setting off down Surf Avenue. In front of our theater was parked a brightly painted school bus with the Hare Krishna mantra on the side. There was one devotee left standing there, and he gave us some cake and a Back to Godhead Rathayatra issue magazine. We talked a bit, and he went on his way. I ate the cake and looked at the pictures, but thought to myself, this looks interesting, but my life is too messed up right now. Maybe I can think about it later. That night, I remembered to pray. I hadn't done that for a long time. Please, God, if you help me out of this, I will serve you the rest of my life. The next day, my life changed. Things fell apart, and shortly I was back in Ohio. There I visited my friend who had been going to the temple and listened to a tape of Srila Prabhupada speaking. At first, I thought it was in a different language, but then I heard him say, "Surrender to Krishna." I was shocked as I realized he was speaking English. Not only that, he was speaking to me. I went to the Cleveland Temple in the fall of 1972 and tasted the prasadam there. I also found out what to do with those beads back home hanging on my mirror. I was hooked by Srila Prabhupada's mercy. I moved in on my 21st birthday in 1973, and I was finally home. In the Cleveland Temple, and I assumed in all temples, we thought about Srila Prabhupada all the time. We anxiously awaited each new cassette tape of his class that we felt was direct instructions to us. We would then discuss each point and try to put it into practice just as soldiers receive orders from their commander-in-chief. We performed our service with the thought of how pleased Srila Prabhupada would be when and if he came to visit us. We thought, if Krishna is pleased, he will bring Srila Prabhupada here. We thought about where he was right now and relied on reports of his travels from other devotees. We had ishtagoshtis, or meetings, regularly, and although there were about a dozen of us, we made big plans to push on his movement for his pleasure. When we sewed the deities' outfits, we listened to Srila Prabhupada. When we cooked the offerings, we listened to Srila Prabhupada. When we went out on Sankirtan, chanting, we read his books in the van and on the way to drop-off points, where we distributed his books to a sometimes reluctant public. I felt protected by this lifestyle because I knew that if I pleased Srila Prabhupada, Krishna would be pleased. I was touched by Srila Prabhupada's mercy. In August of 1974, I was in Chicago for the Rath Yatra and sitting on a bench outside Srila Prabhupada's room, waiting my turn to go in for the Gayatri initiation. I was nervous and thought I would ask the person who went before me what to do. However, I forgot my last name started with an A, so I had to be the first one to go in. The last person had come out of Srila Prabhupada's room and was saying that Srila Prabhupada told him he wasn't very intelligent because he messed up coming up with the counting on his fingers. So now I was really worried. Satsvarup Maharaj motioned for me to come into the room and he closed the door behind me. I was alone with Srila Prabhupada. I stopped and paid my obeisances, then just sat there at the door looking at Srila Prabhupada sitting on a huge-sized Vyasasan, bedecked with jewels, with cases of 7-Up piled next to it. The devotees had put it there. He used it for his upset stomach, I think. His face looked very grave. He motioned with his hand and said, "Over here," pointing to the floor in front of him. So I went over and sat there with my mind racing and thoughts and questions were screaming, "Please, Srila Prabhupada, I just want to serve you. I don't want to be one of those women who just want to cause trouble," which we heard about constantly in many cases given by classes given by so-called advanced devotees. I also was asking him to name my unborn child and to help me understand what to do. I never opened my mouth with all of this, just thoughts. He asked me if I chanted 16 rounds and had me recite the 4 regulative principles. Then he started to chant the Gayatri mantra and I repeated it. I had the piece of paper with the mantra on it, and as I started to read it, I remembered what he had told the person before me. I moved the paper in front of my finger so he couldn't see if I made a mistake. I realized later how less intelligent that really was, to hide my shortcomings from my spiritual master, Jagat Guru. His face looked so stern and grave. I found my mind quieting, and I just concentrated on the words. Then we were done. I looked up into his eyes, which were then like pools of mercy. I felt him look through me to my very soul as he said, "You simply chant this mantra, each line 10 times, 3 times a day. Chant your 16 rounds and follow the regulative principles. Is that all right?" I felt entranced and just dropped my jaw and said, Jai! Then his face again became grave and he pointed to the door and said, "Go." I quickly offered my obeisances and floated out of the room. I swear I was at least 3 feet off the ground. I was telling everyone, "Prabhupada told me go." It was to me an order. Just go and do these things. Follow the 4 principles. Keep your japa and Gayatri appointments daily, and I'll take you back to Godhead. Is that all right? What a simple request for such a valuable gift. Yet, still, even that has been hard for me sometimes. My impression of Srila Prabhupada's mood, extreme gravity and complete mercy, was something I have seen only in him. I notice when I try to become grave, I tend to get mean. When I try to be merciful or compassionate, I get all mushy. His love lifted me up and put me firmly on the path. I was certainly touched by Srila Prabhupada's mercy. In 1976, he came to Detroit. My second child was 1 month old, and we had just moved from near the temple to a few miles away. I had to be at home with the kids while everything was going on at the temple. I felt upset and couldn't believe that I was missing out. One morning I tried to go into the packed temple room to hear class. I got in just far enough to see him sitting there and speaking. It struck me that he must be lip-syncing because it was no different than hearing from him on a tape. Only now I could see his lips moving. I realized then that I was always with Srila Prabhupada if I paid attention to his words. Then my baby cried and I had to leave the class. That was me. I came back later and took my other child and the baby up for a cookie. He handed me the cookie and I felt his hand just briefly. That's all the contact I needed. I went outside and let the baby suck on the cookie even though she was too young for the grain ceremony. Then I finished it off with great satisfaction. When I went back home to our trailer, I was happy and felt inspired. I wrote the Kurukshetra song then, thinking about my spiritual master's mission. I was touched by Srila Prabhupada's mercy. Once a friend of mine who knew me before I joined ISKCON asked me if my life was any different now that I was a devotee. I thought about it and realized that I still had many of the same problems as I had before, like getting hung up on doorknobs and such botherations in this material world. But now I have Krishna to turn to, and that makes all the difference. Srila Prabhupada gave me purpose, direction, strength, and a desire to go back home, back to Godhead. He showed me how to act and gave me the greatest gift and asked me to give it to others. I could tell he cared about me, even though he had so many others around him. Although I had so little physical contact with him, I felt and still feel completely loved and protected. He is really my ever well-wisher. I pray that I can do something of worth to pay him back in all of the crores of lifetimes I must take before I am qualified to meet him again. Please give me your blessings to do so. Your aspiring servant, Rakakshi Devi Dasi. This was written in 2009. So that is my mom in a nutshell. Thank you for listening. Hare Krishna.